I know you are ready for a new story, but tonight we are going to dive into a different tale than the usual stories. This one is drenched in marble and wisdom, where power walked hand in hand with philosophy, and where an empire's boundaries stretched as far as its emperor's imagination could reach. However, I promise this isn't another story. It's a journey through the mind of a ruler who shaped an empire not just with military might, but with intellectual curiosity and cultural vision. It's a descent into the private thoughts of a man who rebuilt Rome's glory while questioning his own mortality and legacy. I want to tell you about a time when Rome's borders reached their greatest extent, when peace and prosperity flourished under the watchful eye of a scholar emperor. An era when architecture soared to new heights, when Greek and Roman cultures melded into something greater, and when a ruler's personal reflections would survive to inspire minds 2 millennia later. From the privileged halls of power emerged a name that would echo through centuries: Hadrian. But who exactly was Hadrian, the emperor whose architectural vision transformed the Roman landscape and whose philosophical mind questioned the very nature of leadership and legacy? I challenge you to imagine walking beside this emperor as he traverses his vast domains, from Britannia's misty frontiers to Egypt's sun-baked temples. Picture yourself privy to his innermost thoughts as he contemplates the cosmos, designs monuments that will outlast civilizations, and struggles with the weight of imperial responsibility. But Hadrian did not simply rule an empire. He transformed it through personal connection. He walked among his subjects, not as a distant deity, but as a leader determined to understand every corner of his realm. His was not merely a reign of conquest, but one of consolidation, cultural renaissance, and philosophical inquiry that would shape Western civilization for centuries to come. He wasn't born to the purple, this man who would become Rome's greatest builder. Hadrian emerged from provincial roots in Hispania, his path to power carved through military campaigns and political cunning. The throne didn't seek him. He pursued it with calculated patience, watching Emperor Trajan's every move, learning the delicate balance between strength and diplomacy that would define his reign. But beneath the weight of imperial responsibility within Hadrian's restless mind, something extraordinary took shape. He envisioned an empire not merely conquered but connected, not just ruled but reinforced. His was a vision where Roman power wasn't measured by territories subjugated but by foundations that would outlast the centuries. Are you ready to bear with me as we uncover how a ruler turned away from endless conquest to instead fortify borders, rebuild cities, and create monuments that still stand today? How one man's vision transformed the very concept of what an empire could be. Not just a territory to control, but a civilization to cultivate. Discover how Hadrian walked the furthest reaches of his domain, not as a distant emperor, but as a hands-on ruler who crossed deserts and forests, sailed seas and climbed mountains. He slept in soldiers' tents, dined with governors, and personally inspected the defenses that would bear his name from Britannia to the eastern provinces. He reformed the imperial administration with meticulous attention to detail, personally reviewing laws and edicts that would shape daily life across 3 continents. Picture thousands of officials carrying his orders to distant provinces, his vision extending to the farthest corners of the known world. But could a man who sought to preserve rather than expand truly succeed in an empire built on conquest? The Hadrian you'll meet in these pages isn't just the builder of walls and temples. but a complex man of contradictions. A military commander who preferred peace, a traditionalist who embraced innovation, a disciplinarian with a poet's soul. His villa at Tibur reveals a mind fascinated by Greek philosophy and Egyptian mysteries, while his public works demonstrate practical Roman engineering at its finest. I want to tell you about a time when Rome reached its zenith, when an empire stretched across 3 continents and the known world bowed to a single authority. An era of unprecedented peace that followed centuries of conquest, where roads connected distant lands and the glory of marble monuments reflected the ambition of men who sought to leave their mark upon eternity. From the dust of history and the fragments of ancient texts, a name emerged that embodied this golden age. Hadrian, the restless emperor who walked the boundaries of his realm. But who exactly was Hadrian? The philosopher king whose vision reshaped an empire and whose heart harbored secrets that would echo through millennia. I promise this journey will take you beyond the official histories. Through these diary pages, you'll witness the private thoughts of a man who built walls not just across Britain but around his own heart. The intimate reflections of an emperor who commanded legions yet remained captive to his own passions and regrets. Now, relax in a comfortable position. Our stories don't require you to watch the video. They are narrated to guide you on a relaxing journey to fall asleep as you listen. Feel your body relaxing, your shoulders, your hips. A warm feeling slowly relaxes your entire body from head to toe, as if you are entering a warm bath of soothing water. Your body begins to relax as the water slowly rises from your feet to your legs, your torso, your shoulders. You feel every single muscle becoming more and more relaxed. Feel the comfort of this moment. Focus on the story and allow the narrative to gently lead you toward a comfortable sleep. And now, let the world of our heroes begin. The weight of the empire rested upon my shoulders from the moment Trajan's widow handed me the letter of adoption. I was 41 then, already seasoned by command, yet unprepared for the solitude that comes with ultimate power. That night, I wrote my first entry as Emperor of Rome, my hand steady despite the trembling in my soul. I had traveled extensively before claiming the purple, but now my journeys would have purpose beyond curiosity. I resolved to see every province, to strengthen boundaries where needed, and to understand what Rome truly meant to those living beneath her eagle standards. The Greek philosophers taught me to question, but only by walking the empire would I find answers. I was born Publius Aelius Hadrianus in the year 76 CE under the distant skies of Italica in Hispania Baetica. My first memories are bathed in the golden light of Spanish olive groves, far from the 7 hills of Rome. Yet even in that provincial town, I felt the pulse of empire in my veins. My family, though dwelling on the empire's edge, carried Roman blood and ambition. The heat of Hispania shaped me differently than my Rome-born counterparts. While they learned of the world from scrolls and tutors, I experienced the empire's diversity firsthand. Our household servants spoke a dozen tongues. Merchants from Africa, Gaul, and Syria passed through our gates. I watched Roman power overlay ancient Iberian ways, creating something neither fully Roman nor entirely foreign. My father, a senator of considerable means, ensured I received the finest education befitting our station. Yet it was my mother who whispered tales of our family's connection to Emperor Trajan, my second cousin. "Remember," she would say as she brushed my hair from my eyes, "you carry the blood of those destined for greatness." I was too young then to understand how prophecy hid in her simple words. I recall standing atop our villa's highest terrace, gazing toward the invisible heart of the empire. Rome seemed a mythical place then, though its presence touched everything around me. The straight roads cutting through wild landscapes, the aqueducts delivering water with mathematical precision, the laws that governed our days, all of it emanated from that distant center of power I had yet to see. At age 10, I first understood what it meant to be both of Rome, yet not from Rome. A visiting dignitary remarked on my provincial accent with thinly veiled disdain. That night, I practiced my Latin until my tongue ached, determined to shed any trace of Hispania from my speech. Even then, I sensed that to rule Romans, one must become more Roman than those born beneath the Capitoline hill. My earliest memory of power came when Trajan himself visited our estate. I was perhaps 6 years old, hiding behind a column as this living embodiment of Rome strode through our atrium. He caught sight of me and beckoned. With trembling legs I approached. He placed a hand upon my shoulder and spoke words I would carry forever. There is strength in knowing both the heart of Rome and its farthest reaches. I did not know then that I would one day inherit his throne. Death came without warning when I was 10. First my mother, then my father, both claimed within months. I stood hollow-eyed at their funeral pyres, watching smoke carry their spirits skyward. The world I knew vanished with them. I was Publius Aelius Hadrianus, a boy from Italica, suddenly alone in the vast machinery of Rome's empire. My childhood ended that day among the ashes. Emperor Trajan, my father's cousin, became my guardian alongside Publius Acilius Attianus. I was told to pack my meager belongings. We were bound for Rome. I remember the journey as a blur of dusty roads and sleepless nights, grief still raw in my chest. The sea crossing from Hispania felt like crossing the river Styx itself. Each wave carried me further from everything familiar toward an uncertain fate. Rome overwhelmed my provincial senses. The city sprawled like a living beast. Marble temples gleaming alongside filthy tenements. Streets teeming with humanity from every corner of the empire. The stench and noise assaulted me, yet I couldn't help but marvel at its grandeur. I was led through the Forum to Trajan's Domus on the Palatine, where slaves scurried to accommodate the emperor's new ward. I slept that first night in a room larger than our entire home in Italica. Trajan rarely appeared. He was busy conquering Dacia, but his presence loomed everywhere. I learned quickly that as his ward, every eye watched me. Servants reported my movements, tutors assessed my intellect, and courtiers measured my potential. I was property of the imperial household now, an investment to be cultivated or discarded. My education intensified under Rome's finest tutors. Greek philosophy, rhetoric, mathematics, and military strategy filled my days. I excelled in languages, but struggled with the physical demands of military training. Other boys mocked my Hispanian accent and bookish nature. At night, I would stare at the ceiling, imagining my parents' voices, wondering if they would recognize the boy I was becoming. Gradually, I learned to navigate the treacherous currents of court politics. I watched how men vied for Trajan's favor, how fortunes rose and fell on a whispered word. I observed the emperor's childlessness and the quiet speculation about succession. One evening, catching my reflection in a polished metal mirror, I saw something new in my eyes. Calculation replacing grief. If fate had thrust me into this game of power, I would learn to play it well. My education began in earnest when I turned 7. Unlike other patrician boys who dreaded their lessons, I found myself consumed by an insatiable hunger for knowledge. The Greek tutors my guardian Trajan provided opened worlds beyond Rome's practical mindset. While my peers practiced swordplay, I lost myself in Homer's epics, reciting verses in Greek until my tongue mastered every inflection. Philosophy became my sanctuary, particularly the measured wisdom of the Stoics. My teachers soon discovered my peculiar fascination with architecture. I would spend hours sketching buildings, studying their proportions, questioning why certain structures endured while others crumbled. Mathematics came naturally when applied to columns and arches. The other boys mocked me as Greculus, Little Greek, but I wore the name proudly. In Athens, during my 16th year, I stood before the Parthenon and wept at its perfection. No military victory could match such immortality. My legal studies proved equally consuming. I dissected arguments like a surgeon, finding the weak points in every position. Rhetoric became a game I excelled at, constructing speeches that could sway even the most stubborn minds. Yet, I never revealed my full abilities. I observed how men fear intelligence when displayed too openly. Instead, I cultivated the appearance of a well-educated aristocrat, while privately pursuing depths of knowledge few Romans ever sought. My travels shaped me more than any formal education. In Egypt, I studied their ancient engineering marvels. In Syria, I absorbed Eastern mysticism. Every province offered wisdom Rome had never considered. While my peers saw only conquered lands to exploit, I recognized civilizations with knowledge worth preserving. I filled journal after journal with observations, believing that understanding the empire's diversity would one day prove vital. The provincial perspectives I gathered became my greatest advantage. Philosophy became my true companion. I debated with Epicureans about pleasure's proper role, with Stoics about virtue's demands, with Platonists about ideal forms. Each school shaped my thinking. From Epicurus, I learned to value simple pleasures. From the Stoics, emotional discipline. From Plato, the pursuit of perfect forms. I created my own philosophy, taking what seemed true from each tradition. This intellectual flexibility, I later realized, prepared me for governance far better than rigid Roman traditionalism. By my 20th year, I understood what set me apart from other ambitious young Romans. They sought power through military conquest alone, seeing knowledge as merely ornamental. I recognized that ruling an empire required more than force. It demanded understanding. The library became my battlefield, wisdom my weapon. When others boasted of enemies slain, I quietly accumulated insights that would outlast any military campaign. In those formative years, I forged the mind that would one day reimagine Rome itself. The Legio II Adiutrix became my home in my 22nd year. Pannonia greeted me with bitter winds and suspicious eyes, both from the barbarians beyond our walls and my own men. A tribune by birth rather than merit, I felt their scrutiny with every order given. My hands, soft from years of rhetoric and poetry, soon hardened alongside my resolve. The frontier demanded nothing less than transformation. Our camp followed ancient discipline. The same measured streets, the same watchwords, the same rituals that had built Rome's greatness. I rose before dawn for inspections, supervised training until my voice grew hoarse, and spent evenings studying military treatises by lamplight. The veterans tested me with small rebellions. I answered with unwavering adherence to protocol, earning grudging respect where admiration was impossible. Beyond our walls roamed the tribes, Marcomanni, Quadi, Jazyges, watching, waiting. We watched in return. I learned to read landscapes as once I had read Aristotle, to discern threats in broken twigs and disturbed earth. My first arctic skirmish came during a routine patrol. The barbarians struck from forest shadow. I lost 3 men before ordering a formation that drove them back. That night, I washed blood from my sword and wondered at how naturally it had come. When Trajan called the legions to Dacia in 101, I marched east with ambition burning brighter than our torches. The emperor himself would witness my worth. The campaign proved glorious and terrible beyond imagination. We built a bridge across the mighty Danube, a marvel of Roman engineering. Then came Tapai, where Dacian falxes carved through armor and flesh alike. I led a cohort that day, holding the line when others wavered. I watched Trajan closely throughout those campaigns. He shared soldiers' rations, remembered centurions by name, and fought alongside the front ranks when necessary. Yet I questioned the wisdom of pushing ever eastward. Each conquered valley demanded more men to hold it. Each mountain pass claimed Roman lives. After the final victory at Sarmizegetusa, I stood amid the smoking ruins and contemplated the cost of glory. By war's end, my reputation was secured. The emperor himself commended my tactical acumen at the triumph in Rome. Yet as laurels crowned our heads, my thoughts had already turned inward. Rome's borders stretched too far, our resources spread too thin. I kept these thoughts private, but held them close. Someday, perhaps, I would have opportunity to implement a different vision, one where Rome's strength came not from endless conquest, but from fortified boundaries and internal prosperity. My ascent through the cursus honorum began when Trajan appointed me quaestor in 101 CE. I supervised the treasury and public records with meticulous care, knowing every scroll I touched could later serve or condemn me. The Senate watched us young men closely during this first test. I worked tirelessly, often by lamplight until dawn, examining accounts others neglected. This diligence caught Trajan's eye, precisely as I had intended. As tribune of the plebs, I wielded the sacred veto, a power both revered and dangerous. I walked a precarious line between championing enough popular causes to gain the people's favor without antagonizing the patrician families whose support I would need later. When Senator Caelius proposed reducing grain distributions, I opposed him publicly while privately assuring his allies of my pragmatism. Britannia admired this delicate balancing act. The praetorship tested my judicial acumen in 106 CE. I presided over civil cases where wealthy merchants and noble families clashed over fortunes. My reputation for fairness grew, though in truth I carefully calculated which judgments would benefit my future. Meanwhile, I cultivated friendships with key military commanders between court sessions. Britannia arranged private dinners where I charmed Trajan's inner circle with tales from my campaigns. My consulship in 108 CE placed me among Rome's elite at last. I presided over the Senate with Trajan often absent on campaigns. The curved ivory chair felt like a throne beneath me, a tantalizing glimpse of greater power. I reformed administrative procedures that had grown inefficient, noting which senators resisted change. Some called me overzealous, but efficiency would become my hallmark. Britannia defended me vigorously in private imperial councils. Between political appointments, I served in Trajan's legions, first in Pannonia, later in the Parthian campaign. The soldiers respected a commander who shared their hardships. I slept on the ground, ate their rations, and marched alongside them. In camp, I studied architecture and defensive strategies, sketching improvements for frontier fortifications. These dual paths, military and political, created a network of loyalists spanning from Senate chambers to distant garrisons. My appointment as governor of Syria in 117 CE placed me tantalizingly close to power, as Trajan's health faltered. I commanded the East's largest army while implementing administrative reforms that reduced corruption. Provincial officials who had grown fat on bribes found themselves replaced. When reports of Trajan's worsening condition reached me, I maintained a careful composure, though my heart raced. The ultimate prize now lay within reach. The Parthian campaign began with such promise. I served at Trajan's side as we pushed eastward, our legions claiming victory after victory. Yet as months passed, I noticed his strength waning. At night, in my quarters at Antioch, I penned careful letters to Rome, positioning myself for what might come. The emperor's cough worsened with each passing day, and whispers of succession echoed through camp. I maintained my composure, though my heart raced with uncertainty. Trajan's inner circle fractured before my eyes. Narratius Priscus and Servianus gathered supporters, each believing themselves worthy of the purple. I stood apart, watching carefully, measuring allegiances. Though Trajan had named no heir, Britannia's favor sustained my hope. The emperor's illness accelerated, transforming the military campaign into a political battlefield. I maintained my duties diligently, while securing the loyalty of key legions. The game had begun in earnest. My relationship with Trajan had always been complex. I admired his military genius and expansionist vision, yet his reluctance to name me successor cut deeply. During those final weeks in Antioch, I attended him faithfully, discussing campaign strategies despite knowing his condition was terminal. Each night, I retired to my quarters, torn between genuine grief for my cousin and patron and the burning ambition that had driven me since youth. The gods test us most when our dreams lie within reach. The message arrived at dawn. Trajan had died at Selinus on his journey back to Rome. Before I could process my grief, A second messenger arrived, bearing news that Trajan had adopted me as his son and heir in his final hours. The circumstances were immediately questioned. Had Britannia engineered my adoption after Trajan's death, as my enemies claimed? I know only that I received the letter bearing his seal. Whatever doubts existed, I could not hesitate. Empire awaits no man's uncertainty. I acted swiftly. My first letter to the Senate was humble yet firm, requesting confirmation of my position while promising to rule with justice and restraint. I ordered the armies to swear loyalty to their new emperor and dispatched trusted commanders to secure key provinces. Some questioned the legitimacy of my ascension, but I silenced such talk with generosity rather than force. A donative to the legions secured their immediate loyalty. Power, once grasped, must be wielded decisively. The journey back to Rome loomed before me. Each mile would take me closer to the throne, yet I knew enemies gathered in my absence. I left Antioch with a modest escort, demonstrating confidence while remaining vigilant. My thoughts turned constantly to Trajan. Had he truly chosen me, or had fate and Britannia's machinations intervened? It mattered little now. History would judge me not by how I gained power, but by how I wielded it. Rome awaited her new emperor, and I would not disappoint her. 4 men's blood stained the marble of Rome before I even entered the city as emperor. Lucius Quietus, Cornelius Palma, Avidius Nigrinus, Publilius Celsus, all consuls, all respected, all dead. They called it a conspiracy against me. I called it a tragedy I inherited. The Senate claimed they acted to protect me, ordering the executions while I still journeyed from Antioch. But the whispers followed me nonetheless. Did they plot against me? The evidence suggested so. Quietus commanded fierce loyalty from his Moorish cavalry. Palma resented my abandonment of Trajan's eastern conquests. Nigrinus had once been considered Trajan's heir himself. And Celsus, his crime may have been mere association with the others. I had enemies, yes, but did I need their deaths to secure my throne? The timing proved disastrous. 4 distinguished men executed as I ascended to power. It painted me as a tyrant before I'd issued a single imperial decree. The Senate chambers echoed with fearful silence when I first entered. Men who should have been my allies pressed against the walls, avoiding my gaze. I felt the weight of those deaths like stones upon my chest. I swore to myself that night that no more blood would stain the beginning of my reign. I wrote to the Senate claiming I had not ordered the executions, that I wished for a more merciful approach. Was it the complete truth? Politics rarely allows for such luxury, but I believed in my heart that Rome needed healing, not more purges. The empire required stability, not fear. For years afterward, I worked to rebuild what those deaths had broken. I attended Senate meetings faithfully. I consulted them on matters great and small. I showed deference to their traditions. I pardoned men who spoke against me. Slowly, cautiously, the fear receded. Some senators even began to meet my gaze again, to speak freely in my presence. Trust, once shattered, reforms slowly like a healing bone. Those 4 deaths taught me the hardest lesson of rule-securing power and wielding it wisely are entirely different challenges. A sword takes the throne, but only justice keeps it. I entered Rome with blood already spilled in my name. I vowed to leave it more stable, more prosperous, more just than I found it. The ambitious heir had to become the responsible emperor. Rome deserved nothing less. The weight of empire settled upon me with Trajan's death. While others celebrated our eastern conquests, I saw only the truth. Our borders stretched beyond reason, our legions thinned across lands we could not hold. Mesopotamia, Assyria, prizes that would bleed us dry. That night, studying the maps in my quarters, I made the decision that would haunt my early reign. Rome needed defensible borders, not glory built on sand. I ordered our withdrawal from beyond the Euphrates. The council chamber erupted. Senators pounded tables. Generals protested. "You dishonor Trajan's memory," they shouted. Perhaps they were right, but I served Rome, not Trajan's ghost. Each territory abandoned represented a calculation. How many legions to defend it? At what cost? The recent Jewish rebellions had taught us the price of overreach. They called me coward behind cupped hands, whispering I lacked the stomach for conquest. These men had never commanded legions as I had, never counted the cost of holding Armenia against the Parthians. The eastern territories were a spear thrust too deep into lands we could not Romanize. Our strength lay not in how far we reached, but in how well we governed what we held. I kept Armenia as a client state, a buffer worth maintaining. Dacia's gold mines justified its defense. But Mesopotamia, a desert trap where our supply lines stretched thin and hostile tribes melted into the landscape. Trajan sought glory through the sword. I would find it through the builder's square. Our empire needed consolidation, not expansion. Walls, not distant outposts. The court poet Florus mocked me. I've no desire to be Caesar, strolling through Britain, suffering the Scythian winters. I replied, I've no desire to be Florus, wandering through taverns, hiding in brothels. Let them mock. While they reminisced about Trajan's parades of Parthian prisoners, I redeployed our strength. The frontier forts I ordered built would outlast any triumph arch. History would judge whether I had been right. I remembered the face of every soldier who died securing Trajan's conquests, men whose names my predecessor never knew. My empire would be different. Our resources would build aqueducts and temples in our provinces, not feed endless war. Rome's greatness would be measured not by territories taken, but by the peace we maintained and the civilization we built. The northern frontier of Britannia greeted me with its wild, untamed beauty and bitter winds. I stood atop a ridge overlooking the rugged landscape that marked the edge of our civilized world. My generals shifted nervously beside me. 3 years into my reign, and here I faced my greatest challenge yet, securing an empire that had grown too vast under Trajan. The Caledonian tribes beyond had proven themselves ungovernable, savage in their resistance. "And this is where the raids come from?" I asked Commander Nepos, who pointed to smoke signals rising from distant hills. He nodded grimly, describing nighttime attacks that left cohorts slaughtered. I'd seen enough death in Parthia and Dacia. Rome needed defined borders, not endless expansion. That evening in my tent, I unrolled maps across a wooden table and made my decision. Not another foot of conquest. Instead, a permanent barrier across the island's narrow waste. I walked the proposed line myself, 80 Roman miles from sea to sea. The wall would stand 10 feet wide, 15 feet high, imposing enough to declare Rome's permanence. A fort every 7 miles, I instructed Platorius Nepos, with mile castles between them. 2 turrets between each mile castle. He calculated the manpower required 3 legions plus auxiliaries. Thousands of men would spend years here, cutting stone, mixing mortar, hauling timber. Their labor would reshape this landscape forever. Local quarries would provide our stone. Forests would be cleared for timber. I tasted the local water, inspected clay deposits for bricks. Every resource calculated, every challenge anticipated. The northern tribes watched from distant hills as we marked out our intentions. They would learn that Rome builds in stone what others can only imagine. This barrier would speak in a language all understood. Power made manifest. Civilization's edge defined in rock and mortar. This will be more than a wall, I told my officers as we shared wine that night. It will be Rome itself, transplanted to this distant shore. I envisioned soldiers from Syria, Gaul, and Hispania manning its length, bringing our customs, gods, and language. Markets would flourish at the gates. The wall would breathe as a living thing, not merely separating worlds, but creating a new one. For the first time since arriving on this misty island, I felt something approaching excitement. Before departing, I stood once more where the wall would begin its journey westward from the Tyne. I closed my eyes, imagining the finished structure, a ribbon of stone unfurling across hills and valleys. Would history remember this as folly or wisdom? I cared only that it would endure. My final orders given, I boarded the ship that would carry me back to Gaul. Behind me, I left 3 legions, countless carts of tools, and the seeds of what would become my most visible legacy. Athens captured my soul from the first moment I beheld her. While Rome was my duty, Athens became my passion. I visited her thrice during my reign, each time lingering longer than state matters dictated. The Athenian air seemed charged with wisdom. Her streets whispered philosophies that resonated with my innermost thoughts. Walking where Socrates once debated, I felt a connection transcending mere admiration. The Eleusinian mysteries transformed me. Few Romans had been granted this sacred initiation, and as I participated in the ancient rites, I felt reborn. The ceremonies connected me to something greater than empire, to the very essence of human understanding. I emerged from those hallowed halls with renewed purpose, determined that Athens would flourish once more as the crown jewel of human achievement. I poured imperial resources into Athens like a devoted lover bearing gifts. The temple of Olympian Zeus, neglected for 6 centuries, I completed with fervor. Libraries, the Pantheon, aqueducts, and gymnasiums rose under my direction. My architects worked tirelessly, transforming the ancient city with new marble and grand visions. I wanted Athens to reflect her philosophical greatness in physical splendor. Greek thought nourished my mind as Roman tradition shaped my governance. I spent countless evenings debating with Athenian philosophers. finding particular solace in Epicurean moderation and Stoic resilience. These were not mere academic exercises, they guided my imperial decisions. The harmony between reason and emotion that Greek philosophy championed became my personal creed and influenced how I ruled millions. My founding of the Panhellenian fulfilled a long-held dream, a league uniting Greek cities under cultural brotherhood rather than political subjugation. I revived ancient festivals, funded Olympic Games, and restored theaters where classical works could breathe again. Some Romans whispered I had gone too Greek, forgotten my Latin roots. They misunderstood. I sought to blend the best of both worlds, Roman strength with Hellenic wisdom. In my vision, Rome and Athens formed twin hearts of our empire, one political, one cultural. I dreamed of a realm where Virgil and Homer were equally revered, where aqueducts carried both water and ideas. As I departed Athens for the final time, gazing back at her luminous marble against the azure Aegean, I knew my legacy would be this marriage of civilizations, this bridge between worlds I had loved so deeply. Egypt called to me like no other province. In the autumn of 130, I sailed down the Nile with my full imperial retinue and beloved Antinous at my side. The ancient land unfolded before us, a ribbon of fertile green bordered by golden desert. As our barge glided southward, I felt the weight of 40 centuries watching us. Egypt made Rome seem but a child in the long chronicle of civilization. The great pyramids of Giza left me speechless. I had conquered nations and raised monuments across the empire, yet these structures humbled me. My engineers calculated they contained enough stone to build a wall around all of Rome. How had they been built 2,000 years before? I ordered measurements taken and sketches made. Perhaps some of their eternal quality could inspire my own building projects back in Rome. Alexandria dazzled with its cosmopolitan energy. Greeks, Jews, Egyptians, and Romans mingled in its colonnaded streets. I spent days in the great library, examining scrolls unavailable anywhere else in the world. The city's grain shipments, Rome's lifeblood, were carefully inspected. The local officials seemed competent, though I noted several inefficiencies to address. Antinous was particularly taken with the lighthouse, that wonder of engineering that guided ships safely to harbor. The temples of Karnak and Luxor revealed Egypt's spiritual heart. I watched the priests perform rituals unchanged for millennia, their movements precise, their chants hypnotic. The cult of Isis particularly intrigued me, a goddess whose worship had spread throughout our empire. I participated in several ceremonies, seeking to understand these mysteries. Rome's gods seemed young and capricious compared to these ancient deities who had watched empires rise and fall like the Nile's annual flood. Each evening I recorded my observations while Antinous practiced his Greek with local scholars. The contrast between Egypt's permanence and Rome's youthful vigor occupied my thoughts. These monuments had already stood for thousands of years. Would my pantheon, my villa, my wall endure even half so long? I began sketching ideas for my mausoleum in Rome, inspired by Egypt's defiance of time and mortality. As we journeyed deeper into Upper Egypt, I sensed a change in the air. The locals spoke of the Nile's sacred powers, its ability to give life and take it away. Antinous grew increasingly fascinated with the Egyptian mysteries, spending hours with the priests learning their ancient wisdom. I could not have known then how fatefully our destinies would intertwine with this ancient river, nor how soon my heart would be tested by its dark waters. I still cannot speak of that day without my hand trembling. October, in the year 130, when the Nile took him from me. Antinous, my beautiful Greek companion, slipped beneath those dark waters as the Egyptian sun set. They brought his lifeless body to me, water still dripping from his perfect curls. The circumstances remain clouded in my mind. An accident, perhaps, or something more deliberate. I was emperor of the known world, yet utterly powerless in that moment. My grief consumed me like a fever. I wept openly, uncaring of the whispers that spread through my entourage. Emperors do not mourn so deeply for mere companions, they said. But they did not understand. Antinous was my sun, my stars. In those first days I could barely function, barely breathe. I ordered the imperial procession halted. Nothing would continue until I had honored him properly. My advisors exchanged worried glances. They had never seen me broken. Then came my decision, born from both love and power. If the gods would take him, I would make him one of them. No Roman emperor had ever deified someone outside the imperial family, someone of humble birth. But I commanded it be done. Antinous would be a god, worshipped throughout the empire. I founded Antinopolis on that very spot where the Nile had claimed him, decreeing it a sacred city with special privileges and beautiful temples. I commissioned hundreds of statues to capture his beauty for eternity. In marble and bronze, Antinous would live forever, his youthful perfection unchanged by time. I wanted his face in every province, every major city. The finest sculptors were summoned from Greece. I supervised many works personally, rejecting any that failed to capture his essence. Some senators thought it excessive, inappropriate. I cared nothing for their opinions. My grief would reshape the very landscape of the empire. The cult of Antinous spread faster than even I anticipated. I blended religious traditions, Greek heroic worship, Roman deification rites, Egyptian resurrection mysteries. In Egypt, they compared him to Osiris, reborn through the Nile's waters. In Greece, to Ganymede, beloved by Zeus, the people embraced him with surprising fervor. Temples rose, festivals were established. My political enemies mocked my excessive mourning, but could not deny the popularity of this new god born from my love. In my private moments, I still speak to him. I wonder if he knows what his death created. A new divinity, a city, a constellation of images spanning the empire. Some nights I dream he answers me. Was it worth it, this immortality purchased at such cost? I only know that as long as Rome stands, Antinous will not be forgotten. That was my final gift to him, not just remembrance, but eternal life. My beautiful boy, transformed by imperial grief into something timeless. No conflict tested my resolve more than the Judean rebellion. It began when I decreed Jerusalem would be rebuilt as Aelia Capitolina, a Roman colony with a temple to Jupiter, where their temple once stood. I had thought it a generous gesture, bringing Roman civilization to a war-torn province. How naive I was. My ban on circumcision, which I considered merely a reform of barbaric practices, ignited their religious fervor beyond anything I anticipated. Their leader, who called himself Bar Kokhba, son of the star, proved a formidable enemy. His followers believed him their messiah, destined to restore their kingdom. They seized fortresses, established underground passages, and ambushed my legions with devastating effectiveness. I received reports of entire cohorts slaughtered. For nearly 4 years, this rebellion raged, consuming resources I had earmarked for building projects across the empire. I summoned my finest general, Julius Severus, from distant Britannia. "Leave your post immediately," I wrote. "Rome faces its gravest threat in the east." The fighting was unlike anything we had encountered, not open warfare, but a relentless insurgency. My soldiers found themselves hunting shadows through rocky terrain, facing an enemy who knew every cave and passage. Each village became a fortress, each civilian a potential assassin. The casualties mounted beyond comprehension. We lost nearly an entire legion, thousands of Rome's finest soldiers. The Judeans suffered far worse, hundreds of thousands dead, their villages burned, their lands salted. I remember Severus's dispatch. "We have won, Caesar, but there is little left to rule." Even in victory, I felt hollow. This was not the empire I had envisioned, one of harmony and shared prosperity. This was Rome at its most brutal. My response was severe, perhaps excessively so. I banned Jews from entering Jerusalem upon pain of death. I renamed the province Syria Palestina, erasing Judaea from official records. Their Temple Mount became home to statues of myself and Jupiter. Some of my advisors counseled moderation, but I silenced them. "This rebellion must never be repeated," I declared. "The very memory of their resistance must be extinguished." The conflict aged me visibly. My physicians noted the first signs of the heart condition that would eventually claim my life. In quiet moments, I questioned whether I had truly understood these people and their devotion to their God. Perhaps greater patience might have avoided such bloodshed. Yet, empire demands unity, one law, one emperor, one Rome. This was the burden I carried, knowing history would judge my actions long after my ashes cooled. I spent countless nights redesigning the imperial bureaucracy while others slept. My predecessors ruled from Rome, but I believed an emperor must understand all corners of his domain. I divided administration into 4 circuits, each under a consular legate. No longer would distant provinces feel abandoned. An empire well managed requires eyes everywhere, I told my advisors, who questioned why an emperor would concern himself with such tedious details. The perpetual edict was perhaps my proudest achievement. I commissioned Salvius Julianus to standardize our chaotic legal system, creating one coherent code for all citizens. Justice must not change with each new magistrate, I declared. In the provinces, I saw women treated as property and slaves beaten without cause. My reforms granted them basic protections, not from kindness alone, but because stability requires dignity for all who live under Roman law. My military reforms raised eyebrows among old generals. "The emperor plays soldier," they whispered, not knowing I had marched thousands of miles with common legionaries. I ordered daily drills in full armor, even in peacetime. I stationed troops in permanent garrisons along our frontiers rather than concentrated camps. Walls make poor empires, I told my commanders. Trained men make strong ones. I designed defensive fortifications that would outlast me by centuries. The treasury was nearly bankrupt when I took power. Trajan's wars had filled Rome with glory and gold, but at tremendous cost. I cancelled provincial debts worth 900 million sesterces, an act some called madness. A farmer who cannot pay today may feed us tomorrow, I explained. I slashed the palace budget and sold imperial jewels rather than raise taxes. When courtiers complained about simpler banquets, I reminded them whose coin paid for their wine. Corruption festered in every province I visited. Governors lived like kings while citizens starved. I removed 17 provincial administrators my first year alone. Write to me directly, I told local officials in Gaul, Britannia, and Syria. My correspondence filled trunks, complaints about water supplies in Athens, tax disputes in Alexandria, border skirmishes in Dacia. Each night I answered them personally. My secretaries begged for more staff, but I insisted on reading every petition myself. History remembers marble and monuments, but governance sustains empires. I built the Pantheon, yes, but I take greater pride in courts that deliver justice equally, in provincial cities that prosper without fear of corrupt governors, in frontiers secure without constant warfare. My teacher Epictetus taught me that true service requires no recognition. When I am gone, perhaps they will say, Hadrian left Rome stronger than he found it. Not through conquest, but through care, the patient work of an emperor who believed himself first among servants. I sought to capture heaven itself in stone. After years of travel, observing the finest architecture across our empire, I envisioned a temple unlike any other, perfect in its proportions, revolutionary in its design. The Pantheon would be my gift to Rome, a sanctuary for all gods that would stand as testament to our engineering prowess. The divine sphere contained within a perfect cylinder haunted my dreams until I committed it to parchment. Though I maintained Agrippa's name on the facade out of respect for tradition, this was to be my vision entirely. I dismissed 3 architects before finding one who understood my ambition. We argued fiercely over the mathematics, the precise curvature of the dome, the exact diameter of the oculus. I demanded perfection. The building would embody cosmic harmony, the dome representing the heavens themselves. The technical challenges were immense. I ordered a special concrete mixture, lighter near the top of the dome, heavier at the base. My engineers looked at me as though I had lost my mind. "It cannot be done," they protested. I merely smiled and reminded them that impossible things simply required more thought. We tested dozens of formulations until we found one incorporating pumice that would bear its own weight. The construction proceeded with exacting precision. I visited the site daily when in Rome, inspecting the wooden formwork supporting the massive dome. The workers poured the concrete in diminishing rings, each precisely calculated. The coffers were not merely decorative. They reduced weight while maintaining strength. And, at the center, the oculus, our connection to the gods, allowing Jupiter's rain and Apollo's light to enter freely. When the formwork was finally removed, I held my breath. Would our calculations prove true? Would the dome stand or collapse into ruin? The wooden supports were slowly lowered, and I watched as the vast dome held itself aloft, a perfect hemisphere suspended in air. The engineers wept. I merely nodded, though my heart pounded with triumph. We had created something that would outlast us all. The first time I stood alone beneath the completed dome, I watched as a perfect circle of light moved slowly across the interior as the sun traversed the sky. In that moment, I knew we had succeeded in creating not just a temple, but a cosmic instrument, a place where mortals could experience the perfect mathematics of the universe. Some called it hubris, but I knew better. We had not captured the gods. We had created a worthy space for them to visit. After years of wandering the empire, I yearned to create a place that captured all I had seen and loved. My villa near Tibur became not merely a retreat, but my greatest personal expression. I acquired vast lands in the rolling hills, where the air was fresher than Rome's stifling heat. There, I envisioned not just a palace, but a microcosm of my entire empire, a place where I could surround myself with beauty from every corner of my realm. I directed every aspect of the design myself, much to the frustration of my architects. No, the angle must be precisely thus, I would insist, sketching revisions on their plans. I incorporated elements from Greece, Egypt, and every province that had stirred my soul. The maritime theater became my sanctuary, a circular island surrounded by water where I could retreat when governance exhausted me. Accessible only by rotating wooden bridges, I could withdraw at will. The canopus became my favorite indulgence, a long reflecting pool lined with columns and statues modeled after the sanctuary near Alexandria. In the evenings, I would dine beside it, the water mirroring the stars as musicians played. I built libraries filled with scrolls from Athens and Alexandria, theaters for poetry readings, and baths that rivaled Rome's finest. Water flowed everywhere, in fountains, cascades, and pools that caught the sunlight. My villa served many purposes. From my study, I governed when away from Rome, receiving dispatches and dictating responses to my secretaries. Yet it was also my cultural salon, where philosophers debated late into the night and poets recited their latest works. Architects and artists found patronage here, experimenting with my blessing. Most precious to me, though, was that it offered sanctuary, spaces where I could simply be Hadrian, not emperor. My daily routine when in residence brought me peace. I rose early to swim in the cold pool, then walked the gardens dictating thoughts to my secretary. Afternoons were for governance and meetings, but evenings belonged to intellectual pursuits. Antoninus often joined me, as did my beloved Antinous before the loss. We would discuss Epictetus or Homer while dining simply on local fruits and wine. These were my happiest hours. In Rome, I was constrained by tradition and the watchful eyes of the Senate. At my villa, I could express my true self. The architecture reflected my mind, orderly yet creative, traditional yet innovative. I incorporated optical illusions and acoustic tricks that delighted guests. Here, surrounded by beauty from across the empire, I found the harmony I sought to create in the wider world. My villa became my legacy in stone. a testament to what peace and cultural appreciation could achieve. Athens embraced me as I embraced her. My first grand project was completing the temple of Olympian Zeus, abandoned for 6 centuries. I stood in awe as the final massive Corinthian columns were raised, each taller than most buildings in Rome. The colossal chryselephantine statue of Zeus dominated the inner sanctuary, while nearby I dedicated a smaller temple to myself, not from vanity, but to link Rome's present glory with Athens' ancient wisdom. My library became the jewel of intellectual Athens. I designed its colonnaded courtyard myself, creating a garden of learning where philosophers could debate beneath the shade of plane trees. The reading rooms housed thousands of scrolls, Greek wisdom preserved for eternity. Nearby rose my pantheon, honoring all gods equally. The aqueduct I commissioned brought fresh water from the mountains, life-giving arteries for a reborn city. I walked Athens' streets each day, pointing to crumbling facades that needed restoration. The ancient agora, the theater of Dionysus, all were renewed under my direction. Beyond the old city walls, I established Hadrianopolis, a new quarter with wide avenues and modern amenities. The monumental arch I erected marked the boundary. This is Athens, the ancient city of Theseus, on one side. This is the city of Hadrian, not of Theseus, on the other. The Panhellenion was my proudest achievement, a league uniting all Greek cities under Athens' leadership. Representatives gathered in the ancient city to celebrate their shared heritage and resolve disputes peacefully. Some senators in Rome questioned my devotion to Greek ideals, but they failed to understand I bound the Greek East to Rome not through fear, but through respect. Cultural reverence proved stronger than any garrison. During the festival of Dionysia, I sat among ordinary Athenians watching tragedies that had endured for centuries. Tears filled my eyes as Euripides' words echoed through the theater. But nothing compared to my initiation into the Eleusinian mysteries. I walked the sacred way to Eleusis, torch in hand, and witnessed secrets I cannot commit to paper. I emerged transformed, understanding mortality and divinity in ways no uninitiated mind could grasp. As I departed Athens, I gazed back at the transformed skyline, marble gleaming in sunlight, new roofs and columns rising above ancient foundations. I had given Athens material splendor, but she had given me something far greater. This city would educate generations of Romans in philosophy, art, and governance long after I returned to dust. In honoring Athens, I secured her role as the empire's soul, while Rome remained its beating heart. In the summer of 122 CE, I stood upon the windswept northern hills of Britannia and made my decision. Here, I declared to my generals, we shall build a wall that defines Rome itself. Not merely a barrier, but a statement carved in stone across the island's narrow waste. I ordered 3 legions, the 2nd, 6th, and 20th, to begin what would become my most enduring legacy, a great wall stretching 73 miles from the Tyne to the Solway. The construction challenges were immense. My engineers designed a wall 10 feet wide and 15 to 20 feet high with a deep ditch, the vallum, running parallel to the south. We quarried local stone, establishing camps every mile with turrets between them. The northern winds howled mercilessly, chilling men to the bone. Legionaries cursed my name as they hauled massive blocks through mud and rain. But I knew their suffering would forge something timeless. Each morning as construction progressed, I walked sections of the emerging wall. The regular rhythm of mile castles and turrets pleased my sense of order. I often spoke with centurions overseeing their centuries-assigned section, each unit proudly carving their mark into completed stonework. The scale of the undertaking was unprecedented. Thousands of men coordinated across difficult terrain, supply lines stretching back to southern ports, local tribes watching our every move with suspicion. My wall served purposes beyond mere defense. It controlled movement, allowing us to tax goods passing through its gates. More importantly, it declared to both Romans and barbarians alike where civilization ended and the untamed world began. I established elaborate customs houses at major crossing points where merchants paid duties and travelers were scrutinized. Garrisons housed not just soldiers, but administrators, interpreters, and tax collectors, the full apparatus of Roman order. I often contemplated the peoples on both sides of my creation. To the south, Britannia was becoming Roman, towns growing, Latin spreading, olive oil and wine replacing local fare. To the north lived the Caledonians, fierce and proud, whom we could defeat but never truly conquer. I had seen enough of empire to know its limits. Better a clear boundary, well defended, than endless, costly campaigns. The wall proclaimed, "This far and no further." When the final stones were laid, I felt profound satisfaction. My wall would outlast me, perhaps outlast Rome itself. The cost had been great. Years of labor, countless injuries, lives lost to accident and exposure. Yet I had given Rome something it desperately needed: a defined edge, a place where we could say with certainty, "This is Rome, and beyond is not." In stone and mortar, I had written my philosophy of empire across the very face of Britannia. I once believed Jerusalem could be reborn as Aelia Capitolina, a shining jewel in my imperial crown. My vision was grand, a Roman city rising from the ashes of rebellion, with a magnificent temple to Jupiter atop what the Jews called Temple Mount. I saw only the architectural possibilities, the chance to bring Roman order and beauty to this troubled province. How blind I was to the deep wounds my plans would inflict. The Jews' attachment to their temple site was something I gravely underestimated. To me, it was merely stone and earth, a perfect location for a monument to Jupiter. To them, it was the very heart of their faith, their identity. When news of my plans spread, the province erupted. Bar Kokhba and his rebels rose against Rome with a fury I had not anticipated. Their homeland, their god, their very existence, they believed I threatened it all. The revolt was crushed, of course. Rome's legions prevailed as they always do, but at terrible cost. Blood soaked the land that I had hoped to beautify. Only after this devastation did construction truly begin. We built our forum, our theaters and baths. We erected statues and colonnades. Aelia Capitolina rose from Judean soil, yet it felt hollow, a victory monument standing over a graveyard of my own making. In Athens, I had been hailed as a benefactor, a Philhellene who understood and honored Greek traditions while enhancing their city. There, my Olympiaion complemented the Parthenon. Here, My Jupiter temple replaced their most sacred site. In Egypt, I restored and built in harmony with ancient ways. But in Jerusalem, I imposed Rome with a heavy hand, deaf to the cries of a people who saw not progress, but desecration. The city was renamed, rebuilt, and repopulated. Jews were forbidden to enter except on one day each year, when they might weep at the ruins of their temple. I watched from Rome as reports arrived of the transformation. The physical city changed as I had ordered, but the spirit of the place resisted. My architects created beauty, but it was beauty that few could appreciate through their tears of loss and anger. If I could revisit one decision of my reign, perhaps it would be this. Not the suppression of the revolt, that was necessary for the empire's security, but my failure to understand what that hill meant to the Jews. Architecture should unite, not divide. It should honor the past, while building the future. In Jerusalem, I built for Rome alone, and in doing so, I scattered a people and created enemies where I might have found friends. Some wounds, I learned too late, cannot be healed with marble. My vision extended far beyond Rome's boundaries. Across every province, I left my mark in stone and mortar. In Britannia, I commissioned the defensive wall that now bears my name. In Athens, I completed the temple of Olympian Zeus, begun centuries before. In Alexandria, I restored buildings damaged in the Jewish revolt. Each structure served a purpose beyond mere function. They were physical manifestations of Rome's permanence and my commitment to a unified empire. My architectural philosophy emerged from both practicality and beauty. I favored the strength of the arch and the majesty of the dome, forms that could span great distances while lifting the human spirit. Natural light became my ally. I designed openings that allowed sunlight to animate interior spaces throughout the day. I blended Greek elegance with Roman engineering, creating a style that spoke of both tradition and innovation. Unlike many emperors before me, I immersed myself in the details of construction. My hands traced plans alongside the architects, suggesting modifications and improvements. In Tibur, I personally supervised the placement of columns and the alignment of sight lines. The builders initially resented my presence, but came to respect my knowledge. "You should go back to your painting," one architect once told me. I replied, "An emperor must build as if he builds for eternity." I gathered the finest architects and engineers from across the empire. Apollodorus of Damascus, despite our disagreements, created wonders under my patronage. I encouraged innovation, new concrete mixtures, more efficient heating systems for baths, stronger bridge supports. When a young engineer from Hispania proposed a novel method for raising massive columns, I awarded him gold and commissioned him to train others. Talent deserved recognition, regardless of its origin. My building program spanned the empire's breadth. In Ephesus, I constructed a massive library. In Smyrna, an aqueduct and grain market. In Carthage, a theater and temple complex. Even in remote Dacia, I left aqueducts and forums. Roads connected these distant outposts. I rebuilt the Via Appia and extended highways into Gaul and Syria. These weren't merely structures, but statements Rome's presence, civilization's advancement, and the promise of prosperity under my rule. As I grow older, I contemplate what will remain when I am gone. These monuments, built of stone, brick, and concrete, will outlast me by centuries, perhaps millennia. My name may be forgotten, inscriptions weathered away, but the spaces I created will continue to shape human experience. The dome of the Pantheon will still capture the heavens. The arches of my bridges will still span rivers. This is my true immortality, not in marble busts, but in the enduring embrace of architecture. Philosophy found me before I found the throne. As a young man in Rome, I encountered the teachings of the Stoics through my tutors, but they were merely words then, academic exercises for a privileged youth. It wasn't until my time in Athens, walking the same paths as the great thinkers, that these principles began to take root in my soul. Epictetus spoke most clearly to me. His teachings on duty and self-discipline resonated with the responsibility I would later bear. Some things are within our control, some are not. This simple truth became my foundation. I carried his discourses with me across the empire, the scroll worn thin from repeated unrolling under tent lamps and in provincial governors' homes. The Stoics taught me that an emperor is merely a servant with greater duties. When Trajan named me successor, I did not see power, but obligation. The concept of cosmopolitanism, that we are all citizens of one world, guided my governance. Rome was not merely a city or an empire, but an idea of civilization that belonged to all who embraced reason and order. My predecessors often ruled by whim and appetite. Nero burned while Rome burned. Domitian cowered behind suspicion. I sought a different path. When the Senate proposed another costly war in Parthia, I withdrew our forces instead. The treasury, emptied by conquest, could never be filled by tribute. Rational governance demanded prudence, not glory, a lesson many Romans never understood. My villa became a philosophical academy of sorts. I surrounded myself with learned men, not flatterers, but genuine thinkers who challenged me. We debated ethics under garden pergolas and discussed governance beside flowing fountains. Even on my endless travels, I sought local wisdom, believing that truth was not the province of Rome alone, but could be found wherever reason flourished. Philosophy proved its worth most clearly in grief. When Antinous was taken by the Nile, my world collapsed into darkness. The Stoic teachings I had studied for decades became not just intellectual exercises, but a lifeline. Accept what cannot be changed. I repeated these words until they became breath itself. The empire needed its emperor, even as the man within me shattered. As Pontifex Maximus, I performed all the required rituals with meticulous care. Yet privately, I questioned the literal truth of our myths. The gods, I suspected, were more metaphor than reality. Still, I maintained appearances. Religion bound the empire together, and I would not be the one to unravel that thread. My philosophical mind sought deeper meaning beyond the ceremonies, even as my hands dutifully poured libations to Jupiter. The Eleusinian mysteries transformed me. I knelt in that darkened sanctuary, a mere initiate despite my imperial crown. What I witnessed there cannot be written, even in these private pages. The experience left me changed, glimpsing truths beyond rational thought. Later, in Egypt, I found similar wisdom in their ancient faiths. I became a collector of spiritual experiences, sampling each culture's approach to the divine like a connoisseur of fine wines. Throughout my travels, I consulted oracles and soothsayers. At Delphi, the Pythia's cryptic words haunted me for months. In Palmyra, a blind seer predicted Antinous' fate with chilling accuracy, a prophecy I dismissed until too late. Dreams and omens guided many of my decisions, though I told my advisors they were based on reason alone. The rational emperor secretly harbored a deep respect for the inexplicable mysteries that logic could never penetrate. Religious tolerance became a cornerstone of my reign, with one painful exception. The Jews' refusal to accept Roman religious practices seemed a direct challenge to imperial unity. Their rebellion forced my hand toward harshness I otherwise avoided. This contradiction troubled me deeply. How could I champion diversity of worship, yet crush one faith so severely? Peace required compromise, I reasoned, though the bloodshed in Judea left a stain on my conscience. After Antinous drowned, my grief found expression in religious creation. I established his cult, blending Egyptian resurrection beliefs with Greek heroic traditions and Roman imperial practices. Some whispered it was mere politics or excessive mourning. They understood nothing. Through this divine synthesis, I sought to make eternal what was lost, to create harmony from the disparate spiritual threads I had gathered throughout the empire. Philosophy and religion served different purposes in my life. One questioned, the other affirmed. One sought truth through reason, the other through ritual and mystery. I needed both. My final temple project, the Pantheon, embodied this vision, a perfect mathematical structure housing all deities in harmony. I hoped future generations would understand my message that beneath our different gods and practices lies a universal human yearning for connection with something greater than ourselves. I found no greater pleasure than surrounding myself with the finest minds of our age. At my villa in Tibur, I created a sanctuary for intellectual pursuit where philosophers, poets, architects, and scientists gathered freely. The exchange of ideas flowed like wine at our symposia, unrestricted by the formalities of court. I sought not flatterers, but challengers, minds that would sharpen mine as steel sharpens steel. Hadrian became one of my most valued companions, meticulously recording the teachings of Epictetus that so influenced my own philosophy. The brilliant Apollodorus of Damascus transformed my architectural visions into reality, though our disagreements were legendary. I treasured the sophist Polemon for his oratorical mastery, and the historian Suetonius served as my secretary until his indiscretions with the empress forced his dismissal. My villa became a living academy. Mornings often began with philosophical debates in the gardens, where Stoic principles clashed with Epicurean ideals. Afternoons might find us critiquing poetry or examining new scientific theories. Evenings brought musical performances and dramatic readings. I participated fully, never content to be merely a patron. My own verses, some melancholy, others playful, were subjected to the same scrutiny as any poet's. I established libraries throughout the empire, from Alexandria to Athens, from Carthage to Antioch. The Athenaeum in Rome became my proudest achievement. a center for rhetoric and liberal studies where the brightest youths could learn regardless of means. Knowledge, I believed, was not merely ornamental, but essential to governance. How could one rule a world one did not understand? My patronage extended beyond mere financial support. I engaged personally with the works I commissioned. When the mathematician Theon presented his astronomical calculations, I spent nights with him observing the heavens. When poets composed in my honor, I revised their verses, sometimes to their dismay. I wanted not monuments to my vanity, but contributions to human understanding that would outlast my reign. Rome's greatness, I came to believe, lay not in the reach of her armies, but in the power of her ideas. Where Alexander conquered with the sword, I sought to conquer with the scroll and compass. I dreamed of an empire united not by fear, but by reason, where Greek wisdom and Roman pragmatism merged into something greater than either. In my most hopeful moments, I imagined this flowering of culture as my true legacy. I realized early in my reign that Rome's legal system had become a labyrinth of contradictions. Provincial governors interpreted laws as they pleased, creating chaos across the empire. My solution was bold. I commissioned Salvius Julianus to codify the Perpetual Edict, standardizing law from Britannia to Syria. No longer would justice depend on which province you stood in or which magistrate you faced. My Concilium Principis became the empire's legal heart. I appointed the finest jurists, not merely friends or sycophants. When we debated cases in my villa at Tibur, I demanded clarity and reason. A law unclear to the common citizen is no law at all, I told them. We reformed procedures, eliminated archaic language, and made the courts accessible to ordinary Romans who previously stood bewildered before magistrates. The vulnerable needed protection most of all. I forbade masters from killing their slaves or selling them to gladiatorial schools without judicial approval. Women gained stronger property rights under my edicts. When I heard of guardians exploiting orphan children, I established strict oversight of their accounts. My critics called me soft, but I believed an empire's greatness lay in how it treated its weakest members. I heard petitions wherever I traveled. In Athens, a widow wept as she described how a wealthy merchant had seized her land. In Alexandria, a fisherman showed how tax collectors demanded triple the lawful amount. Each case revealed the empire's true face to me. I rendered judgment immediately when possible, the emperor's swift justice. The look of astonishment when common people received fair hearing before their emperor was worth any inconvenience to my schedule. The case of Lucius Valerius changed my thinking forever. A young man of 20, accused of a crime his father committed, faced execution. The law permitted this injustice. I not only pardoned him, but amended the statute. Justice without mercy is tyranny, I declared. My Stoic teachers had taught me that natural law transcends human invention. We are rational beings, capable of discerning what is inherently just. This became my guiding principle. My predecessors, Nero and Domitian, had ruled by fear, making law their weapon against enemies. I sought to make law Rome's shield for all citizens. A predictable, fair legal system brought stability to the provinces and legitimacy to my rule. When I looked back upon my reign, I took greater pride in the justice I established than in any monument I built. Stone crumbles, but just laws endure. This would be my true legacy to Rome. My approach to governance was always systematic. I insisted on accurate census data from every province and ordered detailed surveys of resources, populations, and infrastructure. The empire could not be ruled on assumptions or outdated information. When reports from Bithynia arrived with contradictory figures, I dispatched my own auditors. Knowledge was my most valuable currency, more precious than gold and more powerful than legions. With facts in hand, decisions became clear. I restructured the imperial bureaucracy from its foundation. Too long had the senatorial class monopolized positions through connections rather than competence. I promoted equestrians, men of practical experience, to administrative roles previously closed to them. My friend Marcius Turbo rose from humble origins to govern Egypt brilliantly. Merit, not birth, became my standard. The old aristocrats grumbled, but efficiency improved dramatically, and corruption declined when officials knew their performance was being measured. The fiscal health of the empire demanded immediate reforms. I forgave enormous tax arrears, 900 million sesterces, which could never be collected and only burdened the records. Provincial tax rates I adjusted based on local conditions. Cyrenaica's drought merited relief, while prosperous Asia could contribute more. The collection system was standardized, with regular audits preventing leakage. My treasury officials initially resisted these changes, clinging to outdated practices until I demonstrated the improved revenues. During my travels, I personally inspected provincial administration. In Britain, I discovered the governor's reports grossly misrepresented the condition of roads and fortifications. In Alexandria, I found grain shipments delayed by unnecessary bureaucracy. I did not rely on second-hand accounts when I could see with my own eyes. The provincial officials were shocked when I appeared unannounced at their offices, demanding to review their records. Their surprise quickly turned to diligence when they realized I understood their work in detail. Standardization became my watchword. The empire suffered from inconsistent weights, measures, and currency standards that hampered trade and created opportunities for fraud. I established uniform measures throughout our territories and reformed the currency to maintain consistent silver content. When merchants in Syria complained about local officials using non-standard measures, I had bronze standards created and distributed to every major market, with severe penalties for deviation. Order emerged from chaos through systematic application of reason. Good governance required both philosophical principle and meticulous attention to detail. I saw myself not as the empire's master, but its chief servant. When selecting officials, I interviewed candidates personally, testing their knowledge of law and local conditions. Each night, I reviewed reports until my eyes grew weary. Some mocked my attention to minutiae, but I knew the empire's stability rested on thousands of small decisions made correctly. The divine Augustus had built this system. I had perfected it through rational administration. My physician's face betrayed what his words would not. The pain in my chest had grown more persistent, a sharp reminder of mortality that even an emperor could not command away. I found myself waking at night, gasping for breath, my thoughts turning to the final journey we all must take. Strange how a faltering heart clarifies the mind. I began to see my vast empire as merely borrowed time. I composed a small poem one sleepless night, addressing my soul as one might speak to a nervous travel companion. Animula vagula blandula, hospes comesque corporis. Little wandering, pleasant soul, guest and companion of my body. Where will you go now, pale and rigid, unable to play your accustomed games? The words flowed from my stylus with surprising ease, as if my soul already knew its path. The Stoics taught that death should be contemplated daily, not feared but accepted as nature's final decree. I had conquered territories and commanded legions, yet this battle demanded different weapons. Philosophy, reflection, and the courage to face the inevitable with dignity. I began arranging my affairs with the same precision I once planned military campaigns. The death of Aelius Caesar shattered my succession plans. I watched another potential heir lowered into the earth and knew I must act quickly. In Antoninus, I found a steady hand. Perhaps not brilliant, but wise and temperate. When I adopted him, I required he adopt young Marcus Aurelius in turn. The chain of worthy men would extend beyond my life, a final gift to Rome that required me to look unflinchingly at my own end. I commissioned my mausoleum along the Tiber, a massive drum of stone that would anchor my memory to this world. The architects brought plans, showing how my ashes would rest at its heart, surrounded by concentric circles of marble, like ripples extending outward through time. I insisted on simplicity within this grandeur. What use are golden ornaments to ashes? The structure itself would speak of permanence. How differently I viewed my achievements as the shadows lengthened. The buildings, the borders, the battles. They seemed both more significant and more trivial. What would history remember? The man who built walls or the one who united cultures? I hoped they would say I ruled with justice, that I understood both power's privilege and its burden. Perhaps in the end, it was not what I conquered, but what I preserved that mattered most. My body began its rebellion in the winter of my 59th year. The first betrayal came as swelling in my ankles and feet, so severe that my attendants struggled to fit my imperial sandals. I dismissed it as fatigue from my recent travels to Athens. How foolish I was. My physicians exchanged worried glances when they thought I wasn't watching. Their whispers followed me through the palace corridors like persistent shadows. The pain in my chest came next, a tight, crushing sensation that stole my breath and left me gasping like a landed fish. My mind remained sharp as a gladius, while my flesh weakened. I ordered my litter carried to the gardens where I once walked for hours contemplating architectural designs. Now, I merely watched others walk, their easy movements a cruel reminder of what I had lost. The physicians prescribed willow bark and strange concoctions that tasted of earth and decay. My beloved travels ceased. The man who had walked the boundaries of empire now struggled to cross his own bedchamber. I raged against this imprisonment, hurling a bronze cup at the wall when my legs failed me during a state ceremony. Poor Antoninus bore my temper with grace. I began delegating duties I once jealously guarded, reviewing military dispatches, approving treasury accounts, receiving foreign emissaries. My world contracted to the size of my chambers, while Rome continued its eternal expansion. The physicians arrived daily with their useless remedies: cupping, bleeding, herbal compresses. One suggested bathing in the blood of children would restore my vigor. I had him banished from Rome. Even in my suffering, some principles remained inviolate. The Egyptian healer recommended breathing exercises that occasionally eased my distress. During those brief respites, I dictated poetry or discussed philosophy with scholars, cherishing these moments when my mind could soar while my body remained earthbound. Sleep became my enemy. I spent nights staring at the painted ceiling, propped up by pillows to ease my labored breathing. During these dark hours, I confronted my mortality with greater honesty than I had ever faced my enemies on the battlefield. The irony did not escape me. I, who had commissioned countless buildings meant to stand for eternity, could not command my own heart to beat properly. My physicians whispered of dropsy and humoral imbalances, but I recognized death's approaching footsteps. I found unexpected wisdom in my decline. Physical suffering stripped away pretense and revealed the essence of power, not in conquest or monuments, but in facing inevitable dissolution with dignity. I recalled Marcus Aurelius's words about accepting nature's course. On better days, I had my litter carried to the construction site of my mausoleum, watching stone cutters shape the marble that would house my remains. There was peace in this preparation, a final architectural project to contain not my living glory, but the memory of a man who had walked with gods and now returned to dust. I faced the inevitable question that haunts every emperor: who would follow me? The burden of Rome's future weighed heavily as my health began to falter. After much deliberation, I chose Lucius Ceionius Commodus in 136 CE, a young aristocrat of refined manners and noble lineage. I renamed him Aelius Caesar, marking him as my heir, despite whispers about his frail constitution. The Senate received my decision with polite acceptance, though I detected reservation in their eyes. What drew me to Aelius? Perhaps I saw in him qualities Rome would need: intelligence, cultural sophistication, and diplomatic skill rather than mere military prowess. Some whispered I chose him for his beauty or to please certain factions, but they understood nothing of imperial foresight. I needed someone who could navigate the complex peace I had established, not another conqueror. Someone who appreciated the arts and philosophy as I did. I wasted no time in preparing Aelius for his future role. I appointed him governor of Pannonia, a critical frontier province, to test his administrative abilities. I arranged for him to travel widely, to be seen by the people and the legions. The treasury funded magnificent games in his honor to build public support. When he addressed the Senate, I watched proudly as he demonstrated the eloquence and dignity befitting an emperor. His cough that day I dismissed as nothing serious. The gods mock mortal plans. In January of 138 CE, as winter gripped Rome, illness seized Aelius with sudden ferocity. The finest physicians in the empire could do nothing as he weakened day by day. I visited his bedside, watching helplessly as my chosen successor slipped away. His final words to me were an apology for disappointing Rome, for disappointing me. When he breathed his last, I felt not just his death, but the collapse of all my careful arrangements. I mourned him briefly. An emperor has little time for grief. With my own health failing rapidly, panic threatened to overwhelm me. The empire could not face uncertainty of succession. Such weakness invites civil war. The vultures of ambition already circled the palace, each faction promoting their champion. I saw in their eager eyes not concern for Rome, but personal advancement. My legacy, the peace I had spent decades building, stood on the precipice of chaos. I summoned what strength remained in my aging body. Rome deserved better than hasty judgment in this critical hour. I would choose again, more wisely this time. I needed someone mature, experienced, steady qualities found in Antoninus, but also needed to secure the longer future. My mind turned to young Marcus Aurelius, still a boy, but showing remarkable promise. Perhaps the solution was not one successor, but a chain of worthy men. My final gift to Rome would be stability, long after I departed for the underworld. After the disaster with Aelius Caesar, I needed a new succession plan. I spent sleepless nights contemplating Rome's future until clarity came to me. Antoninus Pius stood out among all senators, dignified, experienced, and possessing that rare quality of genuine virtue. In early 138, I summoned him privately. His calm demeanor and measured responses confirmed what I already knew. Here was a man who could steady the empire when I was gone. My plan extended beyond my own death. I required Antoninus to adopt two heirs himself, young Marcus Aurelius, whose philosophical mind I had long admired, and Lucius Verus, son of my first failed heir. I was securing Rome's leadership for 2 generations. Antoninus nodded solemnly when I explained my vision. "I understand," he said simply. In those 2 words, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. Here was a man who understood duty. The formal adoption ceremony took place before the Senate. I watched Antoninus's face as he accepted his new role. No hunger for power, no false modesty, just quiet determination. Several senators who had hoped for consideration themselves shifted uncomfortably, but none dared oppose me openly. Antoninus had earned respect across factions, which was precisely why I chose him. He would not inflame old rivalries or create new enemies. That evening, I shared with Antoninus the lessons of my reign. "Listen more than you speak," I advised. "Travel the provinces as I did. The empire is not just Rome." He absorbed everything without argument. Unlike so many who pretended wisdom by merely repeating my words, Antoninus asked thoughtful questions that revealed his own mind. I recognized in him qualities I had always aspired to: patience, justice, and moderation in all things. I told Antoninus of my vision for succession based on merit rather than birth. "Choose the best man, not merely the most convenient," I insisted. The practice had worked for Nerva, for Trajan, and now for me. If Antoninus and then Marcus continued this tradition, Rome might enjoy generations of stable rule. "The bloodline of good governance flows not through veins, but through wisdom," I said. Antoninus nodded, his eyes reflecting understanding of the burden I placed upon him. As my health failed, I found peace in this final achievement. Rome had suffered through bloody succession crises before my time. I remembered the chaos following Nero, the year of 4 emperors. My carefully designed succession would prevent such turmoil. This would be my legacy, not just the buildings I raised or the borders I secured, but the stability I bequeathed. In Antoninus, I had found not just a successor, but a guardian of peace for the generations to come. I have heard what they whisper about me now, that I am consumed by madness in these final days. Perhaps there is truth in it. The pain that ravages my body has begun to corrupt my mind as well. Yesterday, I begged Antoninus to bring me poison to end this torment. When he refused with tears in his eyes, I flew into a rage that frightened even myself. I, who prided myself on stoic control, reduced to such desperation. The episodes come and go like dark clouds across the sun. In lucid moments, I recognize the irrationality of my demands, the cruelty of my outbursts. I ordered Servianus executed, my own brother-in-law, 90 years old, because in my paranoia, I imagined him plotting against my succession plans. When clarity returned, I was horrified by what I had done, yet powerless to undo it. How thin the line between reason and madness. My physicians fear me now. I see it in their eyes when they enter my chambers, uncertain which Hadrian they will encounter. The philosopher who discusses Epictetus calmly, or the tyrant who threatens execution for failing to cure me. I dismissed my favorite doctor yesterday in a fit of rage, only to weep for his return hours later. This body betrays me, and in its betrayal unleashes something monstrous from within. The court has divided into camps, those who avoid me entirely, and the brave few who remain. Antoninus never leaves, bearing witness to my humiliation with unwavering loyalty. I overheard a senator call me the Mad Emperor when he thought I couldn't hear. Once, such words would have meant his death. Now, I wonder if he speaks the truth. Is this how I will be remembered? Not as the restorer of Rome, but as a tyrant broken by illness. Last night, during a rare moment of peace, I recalled walking the wall in Britannia, how strong I had been then, how certain of my purpose. Now I lie here, watching my attendants flinch when I raise my hand to scratch my nose. I ordered a man flogged yesterday for dropping a tray. Hours later, when my mind cleared, I had him brought to me, compensated and released from service. My shame was complete when I saw the relief in his eyes at escaping with his life. I have begun dictating instructions for periods when the darkness takes me. Do not obey orders for executions until I have been of sound mind for a full day, I told Antoninus. He nodded solemnly, and I saw in his eyes both love and pity. This is not how I wish to leave this world, not as a philosopher embracing the inevitable, but as a man torn between reason and madness, fighting against the dying of the light. Will history remember the man I was, or only the monster I became at the end? I chose Baiae for my final retreat, where the gentle sea breeze carried away the stench of decay that followed me. My physicians insisted Rome's heat would hasten my end, and Villa Adriana held too many ghosts. Here, in this coastal haven favored by emperors before me, I found a certain peace. My villa overlooked the sapphire waters of the Bay of Naples, with Vesuvius standing sentinel in the distance. My days contracted to simple rhythms. Morning brought physicians with their useless potions and poultices. I permitted their ministrations more for their comfort than mine. Afternoons I spent dictating letters or listening to poetry. My voice, once commanding legions, now barely carried across the room. Yet, in this diminishment, I found unexpected clarity. The concerns of empire seemed distant as waves breaking on distant shores. I limited my visitors. Antoninus came most frequently, and I watched him closely, gauging the emperor he would become. We spoke of practical matters, treasury accounts, frontier defenses, diplomatic relations with Parthia. Sometimes we sat in companionable silence, watching fishing boats return at dusk. I found him worthy. This man who would soon wear the purple I was shedding like an outgrown skin. I began writing my memoirs, though I knew I would not finish them. What vanity to think one's life deserves remembrance. Yet I wrote of my travels, my beloved Antinous, the rebellions I quelled, the cities I founded. I wrote of mistakes made and wisdom hard won. My hand trembled so violently that I soon abandoned the stylus and dictated instead to Phlegon, who recorded my words without judgment. The beauty of Baiae provided unexpected solace. From my couch I watched sunlight dance across the bay, listened to gulls cry, felt sea breezes cool my fevered brow. I had my slaves carry me to the shore on days when strength permitted. There, I contemplated the eternal rhythm of waves, so unlike the frenetic pace of imperial life I once maintained. Epictetus was right. We are actors in a play not of our making. I prepared for death as I had prepared for battles, methodically, with attention to detail. I reviewed the Stoic texts on mortality, arranged for proper funeral rites, distributed final gifts. When pain became unbearable, I composed verses mocking my suffering soul's reluctance to depart. Little soul, wandering and pale, guest and companion of my body, where will you go now? I would not cry out. An emperor dies standing, as Augustus said. I would meet death with dignity. The physicians said I had days left, perhaps hours. July's heat pressed upon my villa at Baiae like a smothering blanket. I could no longer stand, could barely breathe. My body betrayed me utterly, yet my mind remained clear. Too clear. I watched servants scurry about with downcast eyes. They knew. Rome knew. The empire held its breath as I prepared to exhale my last. I reflected on my 21 years as emperor. The endless journeys across our vast domains, more than any ruler before me. The buildings I raised in every province. The peace I maintained through strength rather than conquest. I had governed with a philosophy that boundaries matter. Define your limits, defend them fiercely, but respect what lies beyond. Had I done enough? Would anything remain of Hadrian beyond my name carved in stone? My thoughts turned to Antinous. Even now, years after the Nile claimed him, I felt his absence like a wound that never healed. I had made him a god, built cities in his name, filled the empire with his likeness, yet could not bring him back. Death, that final boundary I could not redraw. Would we meet again in some realm beyond? My Greek philosophers offered little comfort on this question, but hope lingered stubbornly. I summoned strength to dictate final instructions for my mausoleum beside the Tiber, a circular fortress to house my ashes, built to last eternity. Yet what of my soul? I recalled the verses I had composed years earlier, words that now seemed prophetic. Little soul, gentle and drifting, guest and companion of my body, now you will dwell in colorless places, stark and bare. There you will abandon your play of yore. Antoninus knelt beside me, dutiful son by adoption, if not blood. I had chosen well, a man of peace and prudence. I whispered counsel about the burdens he would soon bear. The frontiers, the treasury, the endless demands of governance. His eyes revealed understanding, but also something I rarely saw directed toward me, compassion. I turned away, unwilling to accept pity even at the threshold of death. My wall in Britannia would stand longest of all my works, 80 miles of stone cutting across the island's narrow waste. I was that wall. I had defined Rome's limits, created order from chaos, stood against the endless tide of time. Now my boundary approached. As darkness gathered, I understood finally walls must end somewhere. Beyond mine waited only mystery, and perhaps, if the gods were kind, a familiar face waiting on distant shores.